Okay. I had a little trouble getting set up tonight. Welcome back to Minivan Theology. We are on verse number 9, magnet number 9. And if that doesn't make sense to you, when I say magnet, go back to number 1 and then it will make sense. So here we are in the parking lot of Whole Foods. Another volleyball night, living the dream. And look what's behind me. Ah, that is remaining daylight because we have sprung forward into the land of, I don't know, rainbows and unicorns. Everything's happier when it's light, although I'm still using my ring light. Okay, so tonight's verse, magnet number 9. This is a verse that you probably have seen on a mug or a tote bag, but you may also have seen it as an inspirational poster, like in a coach's office. I don't know, does that give a hint to what it is? All right, so here we go. I'm going to read our fragment of a verse, and it is, "Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint." That is, of course, Isaiah 40, verse 31 for our verse tonight, but we're going to show how it's a good verse. It stands alone by itself, but with the context, it's an even better verse. But let's take a quick look at that postcard of a verse. So the postcard version of that verse, it is very inspirational, and that's why you see it in coaches' offices. You see it, on boardroom. I mean, it's everywhere. It crosses church boundaries and is out there in the world, because who doesn't want to, have wings like eagles and run and not be weary and walk and not be faint. And so it's just this really sort of encouraging verse, but it comes at the end of a fascinating chapter in an even more fascinating book. And so tonight we're going to take a good look at that. So let's start, as we always do, by checking out our book. So I know I sound like a broken record, but if you are trying to find the book of Isaiah, yes, that's right. It's right there in the middle of the Bible. I realize I've said that now 3 times, but that's because, no, probably 4 times, because Jeremiah and Psalms and Proverbs and Isaiah all are in the middle of the Bible, which made me think, when I was thinking about this earlier today, I wonder if that's why all those verses end up on mugs, because like the mug design dude just like dropped open his Bible and like, okay, that'll do, stick it on a mug. I don't know, just a theory. Anyway, so Isaiah, yes, it's in the middle of the Bible. It's a very long book. Remember when we started this series and Jeremiah was our first refrigerator magnet, and I said it was the longest book in the Bible. Yes, it was. But Isaiah is right there nipping on its heels. It's a long book. It's another major prophet. Isaiah and Jeremiah did not live at the same time, but they did, and this gets a little tricky, prophesy to some of the same people. So we'll talk about that in a second. So Isaiah, he lived during one of my favorite time periods to study in the Bible, and it's what we call the divided kingdom. And it's when Israel was divided between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and neither people group were doing a good job at following God. They were all terrible at it. And so God sent prophets to tell them, you're terrible at it. And when the prophets were unable to get their message across, God allowed invaders to come in. And so the time of Isaiah spans actually 4 different kings. He lived a really long time. And I know you always like to know, how do we know that? Well, go to Isaiah 1:1 and you will see that he spans 4 kings. And the last king that Isaiah prophesies under is named Hezekiah. And Hezekiah, in the southern kingdom, there were sometimes some good kings or less than terrible kings. They were never that great. And Hezekiah was one of the better of the not great kings. The northern kingdom was falling apart. And the southern kingdom, which was in the southern part of Israel, also had the city of Jerusalem within its borders. And so Hezekiah is the one who was under siege. It's really cool when you can go out and find stories from the Bible in archaeological digs and sort of from extra, like we call it, extra biblical witnesses. So Hezekiah is one of the ones. He was under siege by Assyria, and Isaiah was prophesying all along, like, this is why it's happening, you're not following God. And so Hezekiah repented. He was one of the good kings. And they were able to hold off, it was Sennacherib from Assyria, because Hezekiah was able to make sure that when they were under siege, they were able to keep their water source by digging what's commonly called Hezekiah's tunnel. Catchy name, right? Hezekiah dug it. Well, here's the trick about that. You can go to Israel, and I've done this, and travel under the city of Jerusalem through Hezekiah's tunnel, and you actually, if you're claustrophobic, there is no way I would ever do that again. if you happen to be going to Israel and want to do it, then Godspeed. But it is, it's such a tight little tunnel. And there's water. It comes up really high and the ceiling's really low. But in the middle of it, it kind of does a jiggy jag thing where it doesn't quite meet. And that's because it was the two, groups of diggers, ancient Near Eastern engineers, they sort of missed and they had to build like a little step. And there's a plaque there that commemorates this. And it's not that you necessarily always need proof, but it's nice to have proof that these stories took place in real time, in real space, and you can go out and touch some of the places. Or you can read about them, because I will never be touching that wall ever again. Never, ever going in that tunnel ever again. Okay, so that's a little bit about Isaiah. He wrote during this time period of the divided kingdom for, and here's the catch, chapters 1 through 39 of the book of Isaiah. Okay, so now, where's our verse? Well, it's in chapter 40. So, we're right there at the edge of what happens. There's a lot of debate and controversy in sort of modern scholarship about who wrote chapters 40 through 66. And that's because Isaiah is prophesying in chapters 1 through 39 to his contemporaries, to the people that he, the kings that he was serving under, the real people right there, Hezekiah. But in chapters 40 through 66, he prophesies to the people of Israel in exile in Babylon. And that's not going to happen for a couple hundred years from the time that Isaiah lived. That's why I said he and Jeremiah didn't live at the same time, but they prophesied to the same people. So when Isaiah is prophesying in the second half of the book, it's actually a prophecy. It's a future forward-looking word from God to the Israelites who were not going to follow God. Surprise, surprise. History repeats itself again and again and again. And he was going to allow the Babylonian Empire, King Nebuchadnezzar, to come in and take the Israelites into captivity in Babylon. That's where we get all the stories of like Daniel and the lion's den. That's where Jeremiah prophesied from. And so in our chapter that we're looking at today, Isaiah 40, we start with this first set of prophecies, oracles, visions that Isaiah has for the future people of Israel who are going to be sent into exile because they don't follow God. Now, a lot of people have a problem with that out in scholarship land because, it means that Isaiah is predicting the future. To which, I say, yes, that's because God was telling him what to say. And I mean, either you believe the Bible or you don't, right? Like either you believe that God took these people out of Egypt through the 10 plagues, which were all miracles, took them across the Red Sea by parting the water, miracles. I mean, even, just the life of Moses was a miracle. Either you believe that God is capable of doing all of that or you don't. And if you do, then you're not really going to have a problem with the fact that he gave Isaiah visions of the time to come, a future to come. In fact, all of the prophets, to some extent, do that. And so you sort of have to have a mindset that God's big enough to do that. I mean, if he's not big enough to do that, then why are we even here, right? So that is, you kind of have to make your peace with the Bible means what it says. But a lot of people out there don't love that. So here we are in chapter 40, and it's this sort of turning point in the book of Isaiah, and it starts with these. I'm definitely not gonna read the entire chapter of Isaiah 40 because it's kind of long. But it's important to see how it starts. It starts with verse 1: "Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare has ended, her iniquity is pardoned, and she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins." So it sets the tone that chapter 40, it's to the Israelites in the future when they're in exile, saying that before they even get into all the things that are going to happen while they're in exile, saying at some point it is going to come to an end and you're not going to be in exile anymore. Remember our first magnet from Jeremiah, our first magnet verse, Jeremiah 29:11, was talking to the exiles like, while you're there, build your houses, plant your gardens, but God has a plan even while you're in exile. And this is God saying in Isaiah 40, at some point it's going to end, and there will be comfort for God's people, and that Jerusalem, the city back in Israel, the warfare will end. So before they even go into exile, they're already being told by the prophet Isaiah, at some point it's going to end. Now, the next part of Isaiah is great. Verses 3 and 4, I promise I'm not going to read the rest of the chapter, but you do have to hear this part. Verses 3 and 4. If you were raised in church land, this is going to sound familiar. It says, a voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Now, where have we heard that before? You may wonder. Well, you've heard it, not here in the middle of the Bible and not necessarily here in the beginning of the Bible, but you've heard it at the end of the Bible in the Gospels. Because both in the Gospel of John and the Gospel of Matthew, these are the exact words used to describe John the Baptist as he prepares the way for Jesus, who enters onto the scene and has his ministry for 3 years in Israel. And so John clearly finds himself in this Old Testament prophecy. Now, I'm telling you, Isaiah lived 200 years before, or approximately 200 years before, the Israelites would go into exile in Babylon. And then he's saying, but comfort, because you're going to come back. And then I'm saying in the New Testament, John the Baptist sees himself in this text and says, I'm preparing a way. I'm making straight the path for the one to come, and the one to come is Jesus. So we therefore here in 2023, we can take this text and we can apply it to our life. It can be a word of encouragement to us, even though we're not Israelites going into exile in Babylon, even though we weren't, Jewish people in Jerusalem in the year 0, under the persecution of Rome. We're just here in the Whole Foods parking lot. That's where we are. That's how prophecy in the Bible and lots of scripture in the Bible works. It has a specific application at the time, but then sometimes we're meant to step back and see that God is so much bigger than any point in time. Now, the rest of chapter 40 goes on to prove that, and I promise I'm going to get us to our verses here. It goes on to prove that God is just so much bigger. So if you're following our little postcard, drive up to the Grand Canyon, we're going to drive up and peer in a little bit and look a little bit more at chapter 40. I've just written down a few verses that I wanted to pull out. Here's some terminology about who God is and who we are. I know I keep saying it's one story and it's not about us and he's the main character. This is God's way of saying that. In verse 7, it says, the grass withers, the flower fades, where the breath of the Lord blows on it. Surely the people are grass. I mean, last week we talked about how we're sheep. And this week we're saying, ooh, we're grass, and the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever. Verse 15 says, behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket and are accounted as dust on the scales. Behold, he, God, takes up the coastlands like fine dust. So that's nice. You think you have a really big, important country. God's like, whew, it's just dust. It's just dust to God. And then verse 22 again says, do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth that he who sits above the circle of the earth and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers? He brings princes to nothing, and he makes rulers of the earth as emptiness. He makes us like grasshoppers. So this is a whole chapter saying comfort, because this time of exile is coming to an end. And God's above all of it. He's so much bigger. I mean, we don't even have the language for it. He's so vast. He's so big. He's so holy. He's so other than us. And we're just like dust, like grasshoppers. And then we get down to I promised we'd get there, to our verses. And again, it repeats this question. Have you not known? Have you not heard? This is verse 28. The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not grow faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. Okay, so do you see that our verse here for waiting on the Lord and having wings like eagles? It's not because we're so strong and like we had like a protein shake and today we're going to run really fast. I drink protein shakes. I've never soared like an eagle. It's because this power, this energy to walk and not faint comes from God. It says that he does not grow faint or grow weary, and then he gives that power to the faint. So you're starting from a position of weakness. Like, first of all, you're a grasshopper, you're dust. But he's giving power to the faint. So you're already in a position of faintness when God gives you this power. And it says even the youth, and that just means obviously I'm a middle-aged person, and so like, right, I have to take a nap now and then, like pretty frequently actually. But you know, Riley, who's in volleyball right now, she's got endless energy. Great, good for her. But even she grows faint and weary. And so Isaiah is saying, doesn't matter who you are, you're still just a grasshopper. You're just dust. You're just nothing compared to the majesty of God. And he's the one who gives us his power. And then there's this, you know, just this beautiful picture of what that looks like, mounting up with wings like eagles, and running and not be weary, and walking and not being faint, which sounds amazing. Now, this is where we're going to go down to the canyon and look at it from all different angles, because this chapter, Isaiah 40, it is the story of the gospel. It is the whole story of God wanting to be in relationship with us, and he's showing us the whole picture. The whole picture is like he's up here. He didn't have to create us, but he did. We're just this dust, you know, just gone here and just gone. Like grass, you know, you mow the lawn, it's gone. You don't even think about it. Like what blade of grass? What? But God knows each of us. He knows us, little blades of grass, little grasshoppers, little motes of dust. He knows us, and he wants to make a way for us to be back in relationship with him. We messed it up here at the beginning of the Bible, and he's saying, comfort, comfort. Yes, there are times of exile. We talked about this last week in Psalm 23. There are valleys. You will go through the shadow of death or the valley of deep darkness. You will go through all of this. But he says comfort. And, you know, later in the New Testament, the Holy Spirit is even called the comforter or the helper. It's the same word. It's the same root word. This idea that God is the source of comfort. It's not something like, I really hope someday that I will feel a little better and I can be comforted. No, he's saying complete and total comfort. We've talked about this before. Shalom, that peace, that wholeness, that what we were meant to be, designed to be, is coming into completion. And that's what chapter 40 is all about. He's saying to Israel, you haven't even gone into exile yet. So you sitting out here in 2023, you know, the bad stuff that's happening in your life, you maybe don't even know the worst of it yet. You maybe just don't. But I can tell you that this world has got lots of problems, lots of trials, lots of brokenness, whether it comes into your life or it comes out of your heart. Both things are going to happen. And God says, comfort. Comfort is promised to us. We will not always be in exile. Someday we will return to the design that he created for us, who we were designed to be, and he will give us his power. It's not about us doing the right thing, saying the right thing, getting the right degree, having the good job, having perfect kids, you know, driving the right car, No. It's about God's power. He gives it to us, and then we are able to run and not be weary and walk and not be faint. And I like to think that Isaiah understands that our deep human longing is to fly. And so someday perhaps we will soar with wings like eagles. And that's Isaiah 40. All right. Next week we'll do magnet number 10, the last one in this series, and then we'll start the next one. All right. Good night, everybody.